Let's turn now to Bassima Alghussein. She's a political analyst and was a legislative affairs advisor during the Obama administration. Bassima, we've had this conversation so many times. And we know that mass shootings happen in other parts of the world, but are they purely an American phenomenon?
I think in America, they're given so much attention and the access to guns is so easy. So even in other countries where access to firearms is legal, they still will have oftentimes tighter restrictions on the availability of certain types of weapons, or the process to obtain a weapon is more cumbersome. And it's just so easy in the United States to get essentially a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, it is a small arm, but more people have died as a result of small arms than chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons combined. So we see that it's just too easy for people who are either angry, have nefarious intentions, or having mental health challenges to, obtain a weapon and act impulsively on a whim.
So is legislation the answer? Because you hear of all these causes and excuses after you see a mass shooting. It was a mental health issue, or the motivations behind it, that are never talked about in other parts of the world. So when you talk about access, if you tie up that loophole, does that make a big difference in solving this issue here?
Well, I definitely think it's a very important component. There's no reason that a civilian needs to have access to a weapon of war, to a high capacity magazine that can kill 40 and 50 people, in a number of minutes. If you want to have a rifle, if you want to have a shotgun, revolver, that seems to me to be a fine amount of self-defense, or if you're hunting, an effective use of that. So, these issues have not been grappled with in the legislature effectively. And one of the problems with Congress in general is that it's inherently a reactionary body. So it never really does anything proactively. It always will wait for some kind of disaster, and then there's an uptick in political will for something to be done. But then all of those long-standing institutions that for a long time have advocated for very loose gun restrictions are still there, and they're really entrenched in the system every single day. Whereas the public will get upset, every time there's a shooting and it's on TV, but then can even forget about it. And honestly, at this point, it's happening so frequently that I think even the public upset is decreasing, because the public is becoming desensitized to it, which is absolutely terrible. So to answer your question, the Congress may not necessarily be the place to resolve this matter, and that's why it's important for the Supreme Court to hear relevant cases, which they are planning on this summer, that will help determine whether or not we have the right constitutionally to limit the types of firearms people can purchase.
And let's hop outside the U.S. for a moment. Gun deaths via homicides versus mass shootings. We heard in our story violence in Latin America, the numbers in Brazil, El Salvador. Is there a way to differentiate between situations when they all end in violence and or death?
I personally don't think so. We see that firearms, they're just so pervasive in the world, and people are empowered to cause a lot of destruction in a very short amount of time. And that was not the case years ago when, the only weapon available was a pistol, or before that, a knife. So we're just seeing the capacity for self-destruction really increase, I think, by exponentially.
And going back to your accessibility issue, how much of this is guns moving across borders, whether it's across state borders here in the U.S. where gun laws differ, or international borders? There's a lot been said about the movement from South and Central America all the way into the United States.
Yes, there's clearly a big demand for weapons in the U.S. And then another kind of negative outcome of these events, when they happen, these mass shootings, is then we have public outcry that, gun sales should be regulated. And then that creates almost like panic buying among gun owners, that if they think that their gun rights are going to be taken away, they want to, basically hoard as many weapons as possible. So there's a really big demand for weapons. And then unfortunately, in some parts of the United States, they really associate it with patriotism. And there's just a culture around guns that really, I think, inhibits having rational discussion among the masses.
It's never up for debate. It's part of the ingrained culture. Bassima Alghussein, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.